Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee are on their way to destroy the One Ring to rule them all. You guys all know the story probably. There's this Dark Lord that's trying to take over Middle-earth. And there's this one ring, and if he gets it, nothing can stop him from doing this. And so two unlikely hobbits are on their way with the ring to the only place where it can be destroyed, Mount Doom, in the middle of Mordor, just kind of the center of evilness. And so at this point in the story, they've just left out of Cirith Ungol, a watchtower on the border of Mordor. So now they're in the mountains, just right inside of Mordor, heading towards their target. And as they get towards the edge of the mountains, they look out over the plains of Gorgoroth, and they see Mount Doom. They see their final place where they can destroy the ring, the end of their journey. Finally, they're close. But as they look down from the mountain over the plains, their hearts sink. Because separating them from Mount Doom are 10,000 orcs. 10,000 of the most evil, vile orcs right in the middle of Mordor. And now they have no idea how they're going to make it. Frodo says to Sam, what are we going to do? There's no way. Even though we're dressed up like orcs right now, there's no way we're going to be able to sneak past all 10,000 of them. Sam says, well, we have to try. Let's start by making it down the mountain. So they start headed down the mountain. And as they get to the bottom, they look up and they see something that surprises them. The orcs are leaving now. They're packing up their camp and they're headed north towards the Black Gate. Sam and Frodo don't know why, but very quickly, all the orcs are gone, and there's nothing but the plains right in between them and Mount Doom. Still pretty far away, but there's nothing separating them anymore. So they start to head out into the plains. It's not a quick little jog across, and their journey isn't over yet, just because there's no one in between them. At any time, the Eye of Sauron on the top of the Tower of Barad-dûr could turn around and look at them, and every orc and Nazgul in Middle-earth would be on them in a minute, and they'd be dead. So as they're going across this, there's still anticipation. They still haven't made it to their destination yet. They're still worried that at any minute they could be dead, and all would be lost. But, as you know, they make it across, and with a few more challenges, they destroy the ring, and they save Middle-earth. The Israelites are on their way to the Promised Land. For 40 years, they've been wandering around in the desert, waiting to be able to go into this place that God has promised them, waiting to go into this wonderful place flowing with milk and honey. And finally, with Joshua as their leader, now they can go. They can go into the Promised Land. And so, one morning they leave out of Shittim and they head towards the Promised Land. Later that day, they come upon the banks of the Jordan River, and they stop to camp there for a few days. While they're camped there, the people start to talk to each other, start to wonder what's going on. They start to talk and say, "Oh, I bet Joshua's looking for a way across the river." And some say, "Oh, I bet you there's a bridge upstream that we're going to cross over." And others say, "Oh, no, I bet you that it's shallower downwards, and we're just going to ford the river, but it won't be too bad because it's shallow." So they come up with these theories of how they're going to make it into the Promised Land. But nevertheless, there's still this river in between them and the Promised Land. After a few days, the officials come into camp, and they start giving them the news of what's going to happen. They say, tomorrow, we're going to head over the river, and we're going to make it to the Promised Land. And they give them some directions. They say that the priests are going to be carrying the ark in front of them. So when they see the priests, they're going to follow them because they've never been this way before. So they're going to follow them, and that's basically what's going to happen. So they're excited. Cool, we get to go to the Promised Land tomorrow. And then Joshua comes out and he says, God is going to do something amazing tomorrow, so be ready. Get ready. So that night they start packing up their stuff and they go to sleep, probably not being able to sleep very well because they're excited to go in the Promised Land. They wake up the next morning, and they see the priests carrying the ark through the camp. So they get all their stuff ready, and they wait till the priests get a little farther away, and they start following after them. They keep following them, and this is where the problem comes in. This is where the complication comes in for them, because they now see that the priests are headed straight towards the river. They're not going upstream to find a bridge. They're not going downstream to find a shallow spot. They're going straight into the river. And the thing about the Jordan River is that it's not a little creek. This is a river. And in normal circumstances, in normal times of the year, this would have been, really hard to cross for these people. They're not an Olympic swim team. They're men, women, and children with supplies and animals and food. And, there's no way they can cross this river. But right now, this is the flood stage. This isn't normal times. This is when the Jordan is at flood stage. So it's feet higher and rushing harder than ever. And as they're getting closer and they're realizing that the priests are headed straight towards it, like, what's going on? What's Joshua thinking? I liked it back when Moses, he knew what he was doing. God talked to him, but Joshua, what was he thinking? We're going to die. And the priests, they're in an even worse situation because they're at the head of the pack and carrying this holy ark. And they're getting step by step closer, not really sure what's going to happen. They know that God's supposed to do something amazing, but they're not really sure what's going to happen. And they get closer and closer with each step, and they get to the point where they can feel the mist of the water hitting them, and it's cold. And as they get to the point where they're standing right at the bank, the first two look at each other like, what are we going to do? What's going to happen? And they take that first step into the river, and the cold, icy water flows over their foot. The Israelites are facing an obstacle, right? They've got something in front of them, and they're not sure how they're going to overcome it. And most of us have been in that situation where we've had a problem that we weren't sure how it was going to work out in the end, and we weren't sure how we were going to get through it. About a month ago, I had finally gotten my truck fixed. I hadn't been able to drive it for a month because of the transmission. We finally got the transmission back in there, and it just so happened to be mid-semester break. And so I decided that Monday, because I didn't have school, I was going to head up in the mountains and drive around a little bit because finally got my truck back. I just wanted to drive it. So I head up into the mountains, and I get to this point where the road kind of dead ends. So as I sit there and I try to decide, what do I want to do? Which way do I want to go? I look ahead of me and I see, well, maybe it doesn't dead end. There's kind of a little steep hill, and then it looks like maybe the road keeps going on. It's like, well, what the heck? I can try it. So I drive up the steep hill, get to the top, and the road keeps going in front of me. Well, it's more of a trail than a road, but see, I've got a Toyota pickup, and those things are pretty small, and I'm not worried about the paint or anything, so, who cares if it's narrow? I can do it. So, and it's kind of curvy. So I get through this, around some corners, and it's fun, and I get to the point where I now enter the forest. And it's kind of a straight shot from there. So I keep going, and it starts getting narrower and narrower. I get to the point where I'm like, I'm alone up here. I don't want to get stuck or anything, so I'm just going to turn around and go back. Well, it's narrow, so I can't turn around, so I just put it in reverse and start backing down. I get back out of the forest into the part where it's curvy again, and I realize that, I do not want to back down this thing. It's so hard to back down when you're on the side of a mountain with, when it's so tight like that. And so I get out and I look, and around the first corner, I see that there's kind of a spot where I can probably back up the bank and turn around and get out and go back down normal, and I'm good. So I get back in my truck, and I have to make the turn a little wider than I would have, but it's fine. So I start making the turn, and all of a sudden my truck stops. And that's kind of weird. So I open the door, and I realize that right behind my front tire is a stump. Like, oh, that's kind of inconvenient. So I straighten my tire out, pull back a little more, and turn it all the way again. Keep going. All of a sudden, I stop again. Dang it. Open it up, and there's another stump. I'm like, I could pull forward and try this again. I'm like, no, I want to just do this. And so, I'm going to try to just pop up over the stump. I'm going to see if I can climb up over the stump. So I make sure I'm in 4 low, and start giving it some gas, and pretty quickly I realize that my wheels are spinning and I'm sliding down the mountain. And so I stop, put the emergency brake on, hope I don't move anymore, and I get out and I look at my situation. What had happened is I had slid right in between those two stumps. And so right in front of the back stump was my transmission mount, so there's no way I can go backwards. And right behind the front stump was my front bumper, so I can't go forwards. I realize that I'm stuck. And so I try a few different things. It's not working out, so I call up my friend, and it happens to be my only friend with a 4x4, and tell him to head on up because I need some help. And so he's happy to help me. But he's got a Suburban, so I know he can't make it up to where I am, but I think that with a jack, we can probably get this out. So I tell him to make sure to bring a jack and some tow rope. So he comes up. It doesn't take him too long to get there. And we decide that, jacking it up and moving it's going to be the best way to go. So I'm thinking that, best case scenario, he brought a high lift jack. And, we'll be out of here in 5 minutes. No problem. And worst case scenario, he probably brought his hydraulic floor jack. And, with that too, it might take a little bit longer, but still won't be that big of a deal. Well, we get to the back where he's got the jack, and he pulls out a spare tire jack. I mean, this thing looks like it came out of like a 93 Civic or something, and we're supposed to use this on my truck with oversized tires. Like, how are we going to do this? So we start working on it. In 5 hours, we're working on it. We're jacking it up, moving it a little bit, jacking it up, moving it a little bit, trying these different things. And we're making progress, but we're still not there yet. The thing is I can just envision myself driving down the road with all four wheels on the ground, not worried about getting stuck again, being out of that place and headed home. But I'm not there yet, and I'm not quite sure how it's going to work out. The Israelites are even in a worse position because there's this raging river in front of them that they're supposed to cross. And so as those priests, as they take that first step and the cold water runs over their feet, they notice something. They notice that the river starts to lower. And they take another step and it gets even lower. And as they keep going, it's finally just a little creek and then nothing. The river before them isn't there. It's just a dry riverbed. And so the priests go and stand in the middle where their post was, while the rest of Israel kind of catches up and stands at the bank. And they see that God did an amazing thing, but they're still nervous because they kind of wonder, is the river going to hold? Maybe God only wants half of Israel to get across this, and the rest are going to drown in the river or something. So they start to head across. And, this is a whole nation that has to cross this river, so there's quite a few people. And they almost feel like they're playing musical chairs when there's only a few chairs left and you have to try to make it to each chair, and you're hoping that you don't get caught in the middle when the music stops. They're hoping that the river doesn't start flowing down when they're right in the middle of it. Kind of like Frodo and Sam were hoping that Sauron wouldn't see them as they were crossing this plain. So the day continues on as the whole nation is crossing, and Joshua chooses 12 men to pick up stones from the river to carry to camp that night. And they keep going and going, and finally the last few people make it across safely, and the priests are still standing in the middle. It's their time to come out of the river. And so they start walking, and they know that they made it this far, so they figure they're pretty safe, but they're still a little nervous. So finally the last priest steps foot out of the riverbed, and the river starts flowing again. And in no time, it's at flood stage again, higher than ever. And so they head to Gilgal, which is on the border of Jericho, and they camp there that night. And Joshua sets up the 12 stones, and he tells the people, he says to them, this is to be a sign for the future generations. This is a sign for your children. So when they ask, what do those mean? What do those stones mean? You can tell them that today was the day that God provided for Israel. Today was the day that God took care of his people. And this was the day that he dried up the Jordan River, and all of the whole nation of Israel crossed over safely. and made it to the promised land. So we're getting closer and closer to getting my truck out. We even got to the point where we're jacking it up, leaving the jack under it, and driving backwards and just landing on the stump because we don't have any other choice. And so we keep doing it. We finally get close enough. We think this might be the final shot. This is the final one. So we jack it up as high as we can. And, this is, of course, against all of the safety regulations that you're supposed to use with jacks. But we get as high as we can, do everything we need to do. And I get in, and I put it in reverse. And it's a manual. And so it's a little tricky, especially when you're four-wheeling, to timing of the clutch and the gas. And I know I got to get enough gas without having the tires spin out so that I can just hop over the rest of the stump and land on ground. But I'm in there. And turn it on, start going, give it just enough gas, and I pop back over and I land. And I'm not sure what's happened yet. So I get out of the truck and I see that I'm out. I'm away from the stump, and I'm good. So end up backing down. My friend kind of helps me give directions because it's not that easy. But I back all the way down, get on the main road, and head home. Very glad that I got my truck out, and I got it back for a second time. We all have obstacles in our life, like with my truck, and like the Israelites with the river, and sometimes, but they kind of get resolved in different ways. The Israelites, it was pretty quick and fairly easy, right? The river was gone, they crossed over, no danger, nothing wrong. With me, it took some hard work to get it out, but in the end, God finally did provide. We finally got it out. And so, if you trust in God, He will provide for you, and He provides for His people. And it may not always be in the way you think it will, but God will provide for His people in the end.